Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Katie.
And Katie, this week, first I'm going to apologize because I sound a little stuffed up.
I can hear it.
I fought COVID and COVID won.
Well, we're proud of you for trying. It was a valiant effort, and I'm glad you're still here at this table testing negative.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But I think it brings up a bigger point, right? We have a lot of athletes. It's winter now. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of athletes who COVID, strep throat. Do you have athletes who are sick right now as well?
I mean, 3 out of 4 of the Endurance Drive Primo staff had COVID in the last week. So everyone except me, and fingers crossed it doesn't come from me, but I'm sure it probably will soon.
So I think we want to lead with saying like it's natural, right? It's winter.
Yep.
People are going to get sick. It's going to happen, but it is January. There's plenty of time to get fit.
Yes.
Right.
Honestly, if I had to choose any time of year to get COVID, it probably would be now because we're starting things out, and it's a lot harder if you get sick, during your specific prep phase, 12 weeks out, 4 weeks out from an Ironman. So get all your COVID out of your system now. If you can avoid it all, that's great, but don't stress out if you're super sick and take time to get back into it.
And getting back into it, think about super easy, like really easy, 30-minute easy aerobic. I've been on Zwift. I'm just doing like 30 minutes on Zwift.
Yep.
Super easy. Probably avoid running hard, that kind of thing too as well. Strength training is probably pretty good too.
Mm-hmm. And I'd recommend also keep an eye on different types of health indicators that you have. So if you track stuff like HRV, resting heart rate, that can tell you if you're actually recovered or not. So even if you start to feel better, just play it safe until all your metrics have normalized.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to mention strength training. I want to shout out to strength training because I went into this illness just feeling very strong. And I felt through like the last 7 days, I felt good. Like my body felt like kind of strong, which is kind of unusual. You're just kind of achy and you feel like, oh, I feel terrible. I'm sick and this and that. And I actually felt pretty good. I think that had to do with a lot of strength training this winter.
Well, then I have to say it sounds like actually you won. Maybe COVID didn't win and you've cracked the code. You should go to the CDC and let them know what you've learned.
We have the cure. Zone 2 is the cure. Is that right?
Zone 2 and strength training.
Right. Yes, there you go. Right.
That's awesome. Well, I hope that you feel better soon, and we're really excited to have you for today's exciting episode.
Yes, today. So speaking of winter and weather and all that stuff, today we're going to talk about how to get the most out of your bike trainer in the wintertime.
Yes, and I have to say this is actually very well timed because before, one of our earlier episodes, I was asking you about, it's still kind of nice out and I can ride my bike outside. Should I even get on Zwift? And you said that there are advantages to doing that, but now we actually don't have a choice. So unless you have a fat bike and you're going to go out on snowy trails, you are pretty much stuck inside now. We got a big dump of snow in the upper valley a couple days ago, and the roads are pretty much disgusting. So there is no choice. You have to be on the trainer. So we're here to talk about what that means.
And not just talking about triathletes as well, too. Like we have a lot of runners who are using trainers as well, too. And really for anybody, just a general fitness person using a trainer, right?
Yes, exactly. And we keep saying trainer. So I think before we go any further, we do want to clarify a couple things with our terminology. I actually have a story from coaching the Dartmouth Triathlon team. So a couple years ago, our team has a variety of different team trainers that we keep in a closet, and people can rent them out, people can use them for different times. And we heard that some freshmen on the team were very, very confused about what we meant by these trainers that we kept in a locked closet because they thought that the trainers were people. So there are strength trainers out there. We want to clarify that we are talking about different types of bike devices where you can ride your bike inside. We'll also talk about some things related to using a Peloton bike or a spin bike, but the core focus here is generally a smart trainer, things like the Wahoo Kickers or the Garmin Tacx. There's a couple other brands, but yes, we are not talking about people. Just want to clarify that.
Thanks for clarifying. I was confused too, so we meant to change a bunch of these notes now.
All right.
So why do we want to do this topic, right? Obviously, we've talked about it's, winter right now for most of our athletes. We're experiencing winter. So it does become an integral part of our training plan as well.
Yes. And as we said before, triathletes, runners, all of the above, we think the trainer is really useful. We also wanted to provide some insight on how we structure and progress our trainer sessions in the winter. So we'll talk a little bit about how that evolves with an eye to season planning, because ideally we will start getting outside in the spring, but you have a lot of time between now and then. So we want you to be in the best position to succeed from your winter training.
Probably the third reason why is we have a Zwift sampler download on our website, which over 1,200 people around the world have downloaded. And we thought, well, it'd be great to give not only our athletes who we're coaching and so in our community, but also these folks who have downloaded this random Zwift sampler from the Endurance Drive, just some sort of context and maybe sort of a companion podcast that they can use and understand like kind of what's in that sampler and how to use that sampler.
Absolutely, because we'll note that there are not actually a lot of Zwift Ironman plans out there or workouts that are structured towards half Ironman and Ironman racing. They can be sometimes sort of hard to sift through. So we're here to help you do that. And I think that's something really unique that we offer here at the Endurance Drive. So maybe the first way that we'll talk about this topic is just why we even use trainers to begin with. There are other ways that we could think about training in the winter, but we have a lot of reasons why you should start incorporating this or continue doing it if you're doing it so far. So Jim, do you want to take the first one?
Sure. Well, the first one we just mentioned is weather, right? Yes. Snow, ice, rain, dark, fog, all kinds of reasons why we want to be inside on a trainer.
And ultimately, it can be pretty dangerous to ride outside in those conditions. Maybe if you have a mountain bike or a fat bike that's suited to that, but that won't be the same stimulus that you're going to get from riding your tri-bike or your road bike inside in terms of what translates to later season fitness.
Yeah, so safety is a big one too. And I always say you've never been brushed by a car or yelled at from a black. It's always a black truck for some reason. I don't know why. We're always yelling at us, but we've never been yelled at by a guy in a black truck in the pain cave.
I've yelled at you in the pain cave.
Right, exactly. You have, but that's different.
That's all you have to worry about. We'd also say that the trainer is probably the most direct and successful path to cycling improvement. So the type of stimuli that you're going to get on a trainer is going to be different from what you're getting outside. And we just see huge improvements over the course of a winter season. So we'll talk a little bit about how you get there and what that looks like. But take our word for it, this is going to make you a lot stronger and faster.
Full stop on that one.
Full
right?
stop.
Yeah, exactly. And it's super efficient, right?
Yes.
And especially for most of our athletes, Monday through Friday, we're all very time limited, right? So it's a great way to just get your workout in Monday through Friday. And maybe and obviously now in the wintertime on the weekends as well.
Mm-hmm. And even if in the winter you get a day where it's maybe warm enough to ride outside, generally gearing up for a winter ride can take 15, 20 minutes, all the layers that you need to make that happen. And then cleaning your bike after is a whole other ordeal. So if you don't want to deal with an icy hose and getting wet and muddy, it's definitely needs to be worth it. You need to have a really good day, I think, in my opinion, for it to be worth it to ride outside in the winter.
Another reason why, too, is just pure location, right? We have a lot of athletes. We did an athlete call last night. Lots of folks in Boston proper, New York City proper, and it's really hard or not safe to get outside and ride. So a trainer is perfect for these folks in these locations.
Yeah, and we'd say you can do it all year long, too. It's not something that's reserved for the winter. So we have many athletes who do a lot of their riding inside if that's your situation. Ideally, we want you to get outside as we get closer to long races, but you can prepare for a half Ironman or an Ironman almost predominantly on the trainer if you don't have a safe place to ride outside.
And community as well, right? We have these Zwift group meetups.
Yes.
You can invite all your friends on Zwift and you guys can all ride together. And that's kind of a cool way because you can have people who are very different riding abilities can all stay together on the same course, and you guys can do a structured workout together, or you can just simply ride together, it's really cool.
Yeah, we can probably link in the show notes exactly how you do that, but anyone can set up their own Zwift meetup. You don't have to be a coach. You don't need to be anyone special. You just set the time and everyone gets together, and that's a lot of fun to virtually hang out, have a virtual playlist, all be texting each other during it. It's a lot of fun.
It's super fun. Probably the last one is this active recovery, right? And this, again, for cyclists, for triathletes, for runners, it's a great way to get some more aerobic stimulus, but no impact.
Exactly. All right. So if you're sold and you haven't sort of gotten a trainer yet, Jim, what are your recommendations on what type of trainer people should buy?
Well, it's gotten easier, I think, over time because it seems like there used to be a ton of different trainers, and there probably still are a lot of trainers. But ones that we have really settled on, and I think what is predominating the market is the Wahoo trainers. Specifically, there's this Wahoo Snap, which has the wheel on, and then there's a Wahoo Kicker, and there's various versions of that, which is the wheel off. And frankly, I use the Wahoo Snap, which is about half the price of the Wahoo Kicker, and I don't notice any difference in the power. The power accuracy is nearly identical, I think, between the two, and they're both very quiet. But which one do you use?
I have a Wahoo Kicker, but again, I've used the Snap as well, and I really do recommend both. My husband has a Snap, and I would say in general, it's a lot quicker to take your bike on and off the trainer if you have a Snap because that wheel stays on. So if you don't want to deal with touching your chain, getting your hands dirty, especially if you are taking it on and off a lot of the time, I think the Snap is a huge advantage there and a really, really good first trainer or the only trainer that you use.
And there's lots of other trainers out there. Those are the ones that we have used for many, many years. And we've seen a lot of other trainers kind of come and go, brands come and go. I think Zwift actually had their own. Now they don't have their own, that kind of thing. So, but one resource you can use is a great resource for really any kind of gear. It's trainers or watches or really anything, runner, triathlete, swim related is a DC Rainmaker. And we'll put the link for DC Rainmaker, who's been doing this for years and years and years. But he does this really comprehensive, big annual trainer review. So maybe the Wahoo, you look at over that and say, the Wahoo's not for me, but something else is for you. So check that out. One
thing we will note, though, is that we would recommend getting a smart trainer. So there are smart trainers out there, and then they also say dumb trainers. The difference between these is smart trainers do actually respond and change power sort of dynamically with a platform like Zwift, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we find that that's really the best way to get the most out of your trainer is if you can be using one of those smart trainers, again, a higher price point, and you can approximate these workouts on a dumb trainer. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today does sort of work within a smart trainer framework.
And once you get that smart trainer, you're going to have to deal with some sort of through axle or how it's connected to the trainer. And so that can be a little bit of some research done, right? So when you go to buy a trainer, you may have to ask your bike shop, like, I have this type of bike, what kind of through axle do I need? Because there is a little bit of, maybe buying extra accessories here and there, shall we say, to make it all compatible.
But I would say that is a great way to learn a lot more about your bike. With me having the wheel off trainer, I have learned a lot about how to play with the back wheel, how to not mess up the cassette, how to do the chain. I relied on Jim to do it for me for the first 2 to 3 years of owning a trainer, and now I have figured out how to do it by myself.
She's a big girl.
Yeah, I've grown up. My biggest accomplishment in the last 2 years.
Right.
All right, so let's move into thinking about, the nitty-gritty of the metrics that we use in thinking about the trainer. And I think we'd like to go over an overview of different types of cycling zones, because we're going to talk about them a little bit in the context of how we plan and structure Zwift and other trainer workouts. So Jim, you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So I have this really nifty table that you guys should check out in the extended show notes. And I'm going to quickly go through it, but don't feel like you have to write all this stuff down. But we think about sort of 7 zones, and we wanted to go over this because you'll see some of this nomenclature in some of the Zwift workouts that we do. So you'll see AR, which is active recovery. So zone 1, typically under 55% of your functional threshold power. And again, a reminder, functional threshold power is basically the watts you can hold for an hour.
And actually, I'll jump in that really quick because I got a question recently from an athlete about, is it the power that you can hold for an hour, or is it actually the power you can hold for 20 minutes? Because most of the tests out there to estimate your functional threshold power have you do the test for about 20 minutes. But actually, we then can calculate your hour power from that 20 minutes just because we don't want to make you go as hard as you possibly can for an hour. Although that actually probably would be the most accurate way to determine your true FTP.
It'd be the most accurate and cruel way.
Yes, exactly. So if you do an FTP test, say on Zwift or on Peloton, your FTP is going to be a little bit lower than the number that you can sustain for those 20 minutes.
Yeah, great. So zone 2 we've talked about, and that's typically 55 or 56% to 75% of your FTP. And that's typically where, our Ironman athletes will be training in for racing. And then we get into a really wide zone, the zone 3, this sort of tempo zone. It's a 76 to 90% of your FTP. So really, really big range. But that's the range where our half Ironman folks are racing. And then within that tempo zone, sort of straddling tempo and this next threshold zone is what we call sweet spot. Kind of a cool thing. I think the history is some guys out in Boulder, of course, it's got to be Boulder, right? It's got to be Boulder, right? Some cyclists out there just figured out that threshold workout, whether it's running or biking, is very difficult, right? It's very demanding. So if they found if they did, say, 94% of their FTP, they could do it twice a week and it felt sustainable, and they could increase their FTP pretty steadily over time using sweet spot, but it wouldn't wear them down like threshold. So this whole sweet spot thing, so you'll see SS on some of our workouts. That's sweet spot.
Yeah, I like sweet spot a lot.
And the trainer's a great place to do sweet spot. It's actually pretty hard to do it outside. So zone 4, we've got threshold about 96% to 105% of your FTP. Then we have the dreaded zone 5, which is VO2 maxes, which are really hard to do. We'll talk about this a little bit later. It's about 106% to 120% of your FTP. And those intervals are typically 3 to 6 minutes. And then we get into the really 2 beefy ones, which are zone 6, zone 7. Zone 6 is this anaerobic capacity, 120%, 150% of your FTP. That's 30 seconds to 2 minutes. These are really hard, but these are like surges in a race, or especially if you're a cyclist, you're using a lot of sort of this anaerobic capacity. And then zone 7 is this neuromuscular power. This is the sprint to the town line, right? It's give it everything you got over the next 1 to 20 seconds. So that's just a real quick overview of the cycling zones.
Yes, and we like to be creative with the trainer, so you will actually see a variety of different workouts that we've built that live in these various zones. But I think now we'll talk about, in a typical plan, say for a half Ironman athlete or an Ironman athlete, many of our other athletes as well that have a cycling focus, we might talk about how we'll use these workouts and how we use the trainer in this winter time from January to March.
So we covered a little bit of this and season planning. But, again, January, we're doing a lot of the zone 2, a lot of 20-second, 40-second sprints. We're doing some short threshold. A lot of our athletes are doing short threshold intervals right now. So there's a nice ramp into bigger work to come, and probably some tempo as well. February, again, more zone 2, tempo. And then I think a lot of our athletes are starting to see some of that zone 6 and zone 7 anaerobic capacity neuromuscular stuff. Really hard. But again, we're sort of operating on this least specific to most specific principle, right?
Yep.
So in February, it's nice to build that high-end speed reserve, right? Because we don't need that necessarily in July at our half Ironman.
And we'd say that we like the January Zone 2 base that brings us there, because if you go straight into these really, really hard intervals, we're going to see injuries. We're going to see not the adaptations that we're looking for. So we love the light ramp from January into February.
And you'll see a demotivated athlete.
Yes, absolutely. If the first workout that you get from us is anaerobic capacity, I don't think that you're going to continue past the first week.
Find a different coach.
Yes. March.
Yeah, March. And again, we'll sort of continue on with, these short and long zone 2s, short and long tempos, again, anaerobic capacity intervals, and maybe jumping into the sweet spot, especially if you have some early races.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting. Well, that's what I'm going to be doing, getting ready for Sea to Summit, as we've talked about. And I've just begun my Zone 2 January journey. So looking forward to all that. I think another topic that we should get into now is, we talked in our Lessons from 2023 podcast about how both structured trainer time and unstructured trainer time can be really productive in the winter. And again, the biggest upshot is you want to be getting on your bike. But if you don't want to be following structured workouts as much, especially in January, Jim, how would you think about an unstructured Zwift ride that really still hits these stimuli that we are looking for?
Well, admittedly, I do this a lot. So I don't do a lot of my own workouts, right? So it's the cobbler's kids without shoes, I think, right? So my favorite unstructured Zwift workout, which you could do a lot, I'll start off and do a light 20 minutes of zone 2. And then I'll maybe throw in some 10, 15-second pickups just to kind of wake up my legs. And then I'll just ride for their 20 minutes in zone 2. I'll sit, I'll stand, break up the monotony, use different muscle groups. And then usually 45 minutes in, 50 minutes in the ride, I'll hopefully find a Zwift sprint segment and then just go crazy on it, right? But what I will try to do is I'll try to build into it. So I try to negative split. In other words, I'll try to get faster with each sprint. And what's cool about Zwift is they have your little avatar, which will show you, how fast you did the last time. So I try to beat that white sort of avatar that they've got going on there. So, but I'll use that. So I'll sprint maybe 40 seconds, turn it around in Zwift, use that as a 1 to 2 minutes of recovery, and then go again.
Yeah, and we'll note that if you just use the arrow keys on Zwift, you can go back and do the exact same sprint. So you're not bound to whatever course they decide for you. You actually have a decent amount of control over where you go explore.
But what about you? What's your favorite thing to do in Zwift if I'm not giving you a workout?
Yeah, so sometimes when Jim gives me a zone 2 workout, I know that it's okay if I just sub that for one of these unstructured rides. And one of my favorite ones to do is actually some low cadence climbing in Zwift. So there are a couple different really hilly rides. For example, there's Mountain Route or Road to Sky that just involve these really, really, really big climbs. And I like them because you can sort of get into this zone 3 power while still being at zone 2 heart rate. And what's also nice is it's not exactly like a real hill, and I can usually spin at a reasonable cadence. So something like 80 cadence, it doesn't mean that I'm doing a 60 cadence necessarily going uphill, but it's a nice challenge, and I like that the watches come really easy. And I'll note that there I'm turning off erg mode on Zwift, which basically means that my trainer is responding to the train of the course. That's similar with all of your unstructured riding. And a big difference between structured workouts and unstructured workouts is it's just like I'm riding up the hill outside. But I really enjoyed that one. And it feels cool to see the elevation go up and reach the top of Alp de Zwift in the snow and know that my bike is not going to actually slide all over the place at 3,000 feet above sea level.
And that's we get a question a lot about, should my erg mode be on or off? And I'm always confused with that one because I don't even know where erg mode is, honestly, in Zwift. But they say so erg mode is on for structured and it's off for unstructured.
Exactly. And one other thing is if you are doing almost entirely structured workouts, we recommend shifting your gears just every couple of rides, because otherwise you're going to stay in the same gear for 3 months and you'll differentially wear out that casella. You're smiling at me, Jim. Do you ever switch your gears?
I switch my gears. Yes, I do.
All right, fair enough. Well, switch your gears just a little bit, but in general, during structured workouts, you don't have to switch your gears because the trainer is going to respond to what you're doing.
But you mentioned something called big gear work, low cadence work. So we're going to talk about big gear and we're going to talk about high cadence. We're going to talk about both, right? So why they're important. So as you said, this big gear, low cadence work is sort of the zone 1, zone 2 heart rate, but it's like a zone 3 power, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really heavy on the torque and the tension, but that's really to build strength in your legs. And then when we say low cadence, usually that's 50 to 65, cadence. If you're just new, don't go right to 50 because that's very demanding on the legs and you could develop some knee issues. So maybe it's more in the 60s, right? But it's the cyclist version of a rucking, right? Putting weight on your back and walking up a hill, right?
And I think we'd also say that especially if you're racing, say, a hilly race, a hilly Ironman, like Place or Mont Tremblant later in the summer, it's great to be getting that early season climbing because that can be hard to approximate on the trainer. So you really have to effortfully go after it. And similarly, if you live in a place that's really flat and you're doing a hilly race, the trainer is sometimes one of the only ways that you can get that good hill training in. So I've definitely trained athletes on almost entirely Zwift for hilly races. And of course, the very best stimulus is going to be outside hills. But if Zwift is your only option, it's definitely possible to get ready for something like that.
And we used a lot of low cadence work last year for Green River Placid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it helped a lot. As soon as I was riding outside, it wasn't shocking or difficult when I was hitting, 60 RPMs, for example. And I think a lot of triathletes don't really know how to climb very well. It is a little uncomfortable on the tri-bike. I saw even in the Ironman Lake Placid race that tons of people were, for example, staying down in aero as they're going up the J climbs, which are pretty steep. And, you're going 8 miles an hour or something. And people just didn't know how to bike handle on those. So get comfortable with, especially if you're a triathlete, being in that lower cadence setup on your tri-bike, because that is what you'll have to do to be the most efficient and just be the most comfortable on a hilly race day.
Right. Yeah. Sort of a side note there. If you're going under, say, 14 miles an hour, just sit up on your tri-bike. Dude, there is no arrow position.
Don't be a hero.
Exactly.
There's no arrow here.
No,
you just look silly.
And it just feels terrible. It's not as efficient. And you get more power by sitting up because you're opening up your hips, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually also interesting too with this low gear, because I've always gone back and forth. I'm like, does it work? Does it not work? And sometimes the science says, it does work. And some scientists say, that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But I always fall on like the best people in the world, best athletes in the world, best cyclists in the world, the best coaches in the world are doing a lot of low cadence, big gear work. So it does work, right? But sometimes science is a little bit behind explaining why things work. But humans are very clever and we figure things out.
Yes. And I think that in general, on this podcast and our philosophy in general is always a blend of science and experience. So for us, big gear work has worked really well for getting ready for hilly Ironmans. You should try it out and see if it works for you. But again, we're kind of drawing from both as we develop our expertise on this.
So the other side of that is these high cadence workouts. And this is really about sort of connecting our feet to our brain. Mm-hmm. When we talk about high cadence, we're talking about spinning at, 100 plus RPM, something really, really fast. But the watch should be super low, like zone 1, right? So it's not difficult work in the sense of it's really hard to do, although it can be hard to do. But we have a lot of workouts that do 10 by 1, 15 by 1, or 20 by 1 of high cadence, where you're just doing, again, zone 1 watts, and you're just trying to spin your feet as fast as you can, telling your brain, like, I'm connected to your feet.
Mm-hmm. And I think you want to think about the motion that your feet are making is very circular, not so much of like an up and down mashing at the pedals. Similarly, if you feel like you're bouncing when you're doing that, that's not exactly what we're looking for. So you want to be really controlled in the hips and the core and engaging your whole body, really engage those glutes, but still spinning at a really high cadence. So that's something you can work on. And again, it might be hard to jump into over 100, but you can start at 90. If you're usually pedaling, in the 70s, 90 is going to feel high, then go up to 95, then go up to 100, and hopefully eventually you can get more comfortable at 105, 110, even 115 for cadence.
That's a great point about technique. I hadn't thought about that, but there is a lot of technique in cycling, right? We are kind of affixed to these pedals, but there's a lot going on there that we could maybe talk about in another episode, but yeah.
And one thing I'll just add to in terms of this cadence, you want to make sure that your cleat position is also very, very good, because we were talking earlier about knee issues, but if your cleat position on the bottom of your cycling shoes is a little bit off, it can just be a couple of degrees off, that can lead to some knee stuff. So again, we've talked about this before, but if you want to prevent injuries, please get a bike fit, and that starts with cleats. So again, if you feel like they're getting loose and they get off, just make sure that you're getting that checked out so you don't have knee injuries with cadence workouts.
The great thing also about high cadence as well, you can just use these I do these at the end of a lot of outdoor rides. You're coming back into town, maybe you're 10, 15 minutes out from your car. Spend 5 or 10 minutes of doing 30 seconds. Again, just shift way into easy gear, spin up to 100, 105, and then go 30 seconds normal, and then back and forth. And I think you'll be really surprised at how fresh your legs feel when you finish, and fresh even the next day.
Absolutely. And then I think a final point on cadence that we'd like to make is that everyone does have a bit of a different natural cadence that their body prefers or that's the most efficient for them. But in general, the cadence that you probably want to be targeting on these average rides is kind of in the 80 to 90 RPMs range. I would cut through the bullshit on riding over 100 cadence, but in general, you want that 80 to 90 because that's going to be probably the best for most of the workouts that we're focusing on.
And we bring this up because it obviously seems obvious for a lot of people that we should be riding, maybe 80, 90 RPM. But I had an athlete last year who I just couldn't figure out what was going on. I thought the trainer was broken. We went back and forth so many times trying to figure out what's going on because nothing was really matching up. The power wasn't matching up, just nothing was working. So I asked him to send me a video of him riding his bike. It just turns out this man just wasn't that familiar with riding bikes. It was a new experience for him. And he was pedaling at probably 40 to 50 RPM. And for him, that felt natural, right? That was the way you pedal the bike. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, okay, now I know what's going on. You're pedaling so slow. So let's increase. So we worked. It didn't happen overnight. It was really took a long time to work into 50 to 60 to 70, but he eventually got there and his bike really improved after we got the sort of. So it seems very obvious, but we thought we'd mention that.
And one other thing you can do if you really want to nail down that cadence is sometimes I'll actually pick music to listen to that hits a certain RPMs. And that's nice because then you just pedal along with the beat and it can help you kind of feel like, okay, this is what 80 RPMs is like. This is what 90 is like. This is what 60 is like. That can kind of make the ride go back a little faster, and maybe we can pull some resources on those RPM playlists.
Yeah, get your pain cave music list going, right?
Exactly.
We have a lot of them.
Yep. One more point on this too is racing does kind of fall at different cadences depending on the type of race that you're doing. So in general, shorter races like sprints and Olympics tend to be pretty hot and they go off at a higher cadence. So in general, we see an average that's like 85 to 95. Whereas for a half Ironman, it's going to be closer to 75 to 85, and Ironman might be as low as 70 to 80 RPMs. So that doesn't mean you have to do all your training there if you're preparing for a race. Again, that 80 to 90 is going to be a good rule of thumb for most athletes, but it's just good to point out that this is different depending on your goal races, and you should be kind of prepared for that mentally and physically.
Katie, what about Zwift racing during the winter?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to race.
I know. Well, if you're looking for a stimulus, but there are not races around, we do recommend Zwift racing. So we've done that a couple of times before, and they're a really fun way to challenge yourself and infuse some competitive spirit during those long winter months. And they can also be used as a substitute for an FTP test. So if it's really hard for you to sit down and be like, I'm just going to be in the pain cave of my mind and do this 20-minute test that's hard, you can just say, I'm going to do a race. And then usually your power number is going to be pretty good on that.
I'd much rather do a race than do an FTP test, another one.
I agree
this group suffering is much easier.
Yes. Absolutely. Speaking of intensity, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you generally do like VO2 max type work on the trainer? I think we alluded to this in talking about zones.
Yeah. I mean, again, the trainer is this incredible tool. And it's sort of personal preference. But from a coaching perspective, I typically don't do a lot of VO2 max work on the trainer because it is super, super intense, right? It's really hard work. And I find that those VO2 max blocks, they're typically 6 to 8 weeks, and they really benefit the athlete the most, leading into that last 12 weeks before their A race. And so typically, not always, but typically we can do those outside on a hill. So I won't subject a lot of our at least my athletes anyway. Maybe you do it differently. What do you do this?
I agree with that. I have secret pain for my athletes. No, I generally don't use VO2 max for my athletes unless they are doing, say, like a winter A race and they're training somewhere like the Upper Valley. I had a couple athletes who were racing their A races in December or January. One race in Buenos Aires and one race in Florida, and there we did play with VO2 max inside just a little bit. But if I had had the option, I would have definitely preferred that they do that work outside.
Right on. How about, okay, so one of the winners during COVID was Peloton. Exploded, right?
Yep.
And so we have a lot of athletes now who do have Peloton bikes, and it was a substantial investment people made, right? And so I'm hearing it less and less now, but a few years ago, a lot of my new athletes said, well, I have a Peloton. How do I use my Peloton? So what do we do in that case?
Yeah. So, I mean, we'd say at the end of the day, like if you're getting on a bike, you're building fitness, that's all great stuff. But if you're preparing for a half Ironman or an Ironman, the more time that you spend on your bike, the more comfortable you're going to be on your bike when you go outside. So in general, the sooner you can get on it, the better. But I think if you're going to use a Peloton or some type of spin bike, just try to get as much data as you can. So your FTP on that bike, your power data, your heart rate data, your cadence, so that we can actually just approximate the way that we do workouts that are on a trainer. So try to just figure out how you work with that bike. And above all, make sure that it's properly fit to you. We often see people who are not sized properly to a Peloton bike. So if you can check all those boxes, we can make it work for a training plan. But at the end of the day, your bike is going to be something that's the most comfortable when you transition to outdoor riding.
Sure. I always say, the best bike is the bike that you own. And so if the bike that you own is, at this moment, is a Peloton, then that's the best bike, right? But yeah, it's like you say, we typically get a bike that's fit for you and start training on that bike. So they're specific to you and to your race. But, also there's these hotel bikes, right? Like if you are at a hotel and you really want to do your spin workout, go for it, right? We're very pragmatic here.
And one hack that I have actually is if you are going to hop on a Peloton, I would try to adjust it a little bit, and you could kind of make it a little bit more of an aero fit than the bike is naturally. We don't really want you to be sitting up like it's a tricycle, but if you can bring those handlebars way down, it's going to be a little bit closer to what you'll be doing outside. So any of those tweaks, those don't cost any money to make that tweak to your bike, and we do recommend playing around with it and, of course, getting fit, which you can do at the Peloton store.
Okay, so we've spent years on the trainer, for better, for worse. What's your favorite workout on the trainer?
Ooh. So my favorite workout on the trainer is we do these anaerobic capacity workouts that we haven't started yet for this season, but one of them basically does 10 by 30 seconds at 115% of your FTP, and then 30 seconds at 55% of your FTP. So that is going back and forth between like really, really, really hard and really, really easy, barely any resistance. And we'll do 10 of those. We'll repeat it 10 times, and we have like 15 minutes of 55% FTP, super easy between them. And I love that workout because it's the perfect version of easy is easy and hard is hard. There is no middle in that workout. And when you're spinning, at 55%, you feel like you're barely doing anything. And you are like almost seeing red sometimes at the end of those anaerobic capacities. So it's really fun to end up with an average heart rate that's really like in zone 2 and seems super chill, but know that you did some really good work.
That's a hard workout. I don't want to do that workout. That one's not my favorite workout.
Okay, well, what's your favorite workout, Jim?
I think I just already said it's that zone 2 with that 120% of the FTP, sprints. And also there's these short threshold intervals that I wrote a couple years ago that a lot of folks are doing now. And I just love them because they give you a little punch, not quite as beefy as the one you just described.
But that being said, I'd say those are similar stimuli. If you're doing Z2 with 120% burst, maybe the exact number that we're doing is different. But at the end of the day, we are working on building that base with easy stuff, but also including the spice. And that's going to be something that just repeats in all of our workouts. It's a lot of easy and a little bit of spice. Yeah.
So we've talked about how we use the trainer, January through March, but as we get closer to warmer times here, so what do you consider like the best combination of inside and outside riding for, let's take a Ironman and like half Ironman?
Yeah, so I think in general in the winter, like if you get lucky enough to get outside in your bike a little bit for a weekend ride, that's fine. But I usually operate with the assumption that that's not going to happen until say mid-March or something. So I'm mostly focusing on the trainer. And if I want to build outdoor durability, which we'll talk about in other podcasts, I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to go for a cross-country ski. I'm going to do something else besides biking. I'm going to concentrate almost everything on the trainer. And what's nice is we're so early in the season that we don't really recommend sitting on the trainer for 4 hours on a weekend. You can save those long rides for as soon as you get outside. And I think the longest we have ever done on the trainer is probably 3 or 3.5 hours. And even then, probably wouldn't regularly recommend that. So in general, you can keep things shorter, but transitioning into a combination of outdoor riding and indoor riding in mid-March, and then trending towards almost primarily outdoor riding by May and June is the way I think about it. How about you?
Well, actually, I think we've done a little bit longer than 3.5 hours a couple of times.
I think I blacked out, actually.
Right, exactly right. But we have. But yeah, in general, right, we try to save the long rides for outdoors because, again, those 12 is usually closer to your A race or warmer months. But yeah, we'll talk about the outdoor durability and why it's important to get exposed to the sun and to the heat and to the wind and to the rain and to the cold and why that's all important. Because honestly, you're going to face a lot of that type of stuff on race day.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right. So, Jim, in general, how many hours per week would you recommend on the trainer for, say, Ironman, half Ironman, Olympic, or sprint distance racing?
So for sprint and Olympic, I would probably like 3 to 5 would probably be sufficient this time of year. Half Ironman, we're around the 5 to 7. And then our Ironman folks are generally 6 to 10. I know that's kind of a wide range there, but just wanted to give some folks some guidance on what should I be doing? How much should I be doing if they're not getting coached by us?
And we'd say that this time of year, again, you can get away with 6 hours a week on the trainer for an Ironman, even though that might not seem like so much given that your race is 6 hours plus on the bike, but we think that's fine for this time of year. One quick hack on that, actually, as you're thinking about hours per week, is that trainer doubles can often be a lot more bearable than rides that are over 2 hours. So sometimes if we do an hour and 15 minutes in the morning and then an hour in the afternoon, that definitely doesn't feel anywhere near as long as sitting down and saying, I'm going to spend 2 hours and 15 minutes on the trainer right now. So we've played with that a little bit, and it's a fun way to just keep building that hours and mileage, and works a lot better with like a standard 9 to 5 work schedule.
That's a great hack. I mean, sometimes we use that also for running as well. We won't talk about that now, but that's been sort of double run days, which are kind of interesting. Yeah,
exactly.
So we have spent a lot of time on the trainer, and we've made lots of mistakes. I have made lots of mistakes on the trainer, which I'll talk a little bit about. But we thought we'd compiled some of the trainer pro tips that we have. So I'm going to start the top priority. This may seem incredibly obvious, but it wasn't obvious for me for the first 5 years I wrote on a trainer.
Wow, 5 years
I know.
Suffering.
Yeah, I know. I'm thick-headed. So folks, get a fan.
Yep.
All right. I use this standing Lascaux fan, and then I also have these smaller Vornado fans as well around the pain cave. But you don't need to spend a lot of money on super expensive cycling-specific
Yeah, Zwift has a special fan that's supposed to approximate wind outside. Just so you know, the Lasco also approximates wind outside.
Exactly right. So I say that I did because I rode the first 5 years without a fan. I just didn't even think about it. Yeah. And unfortunately, I was sweating a lot on my first tri bike. And I ended up having to replace my entire front fork.
Wow.
Yes.
So that's another hack is actually put a towel down. You want to cover up that bike so you don't get a lot of sweat on it. And you definitely want to have a fan. I would say one quick hack on that is that we have had athletes do some like lower fan or fan off sessions to acclimate to hot races. This is a pretty specialized situation. So it's really only if you are racing in an extremely hot or humid climate and you have no access to training in that leading up to it. So even Kona could be a decent example of that. But frankly, I find those sessions so unbearable that sometimes I'm like, we'll just roll the dice and see how it goes at Kona. I've had other athletes who are stronger than me try that out.
That's a very, very challenging set. Yes.
Absolutely. All right, second tip. Different brands will try to sell you a trainer tire. It's usually yellow or red. You don't actually need a specific trainer tire. If you're using something like the Kick or Snap that keeps the wheel on, you could just use your regular tire. And in general, maybe use the tires that you were riding in the summer or fall, and then you replace them in the winter and spring. But you should be doing that anyway because tires wear out over time. So save your money and don't buy the special extra trainer tire.
And the tire that we recommend, we'll put a link in this here, is the Continental GP 5000. Mm-hmm. So again, like Katie said, ride them all through the spring and the summer. And then if you have a wheel on trainer, use the same one and then buy a couple pairs for the next year.
Absolutely. All right. Another tip is use a headband or a visor to help control sweat flow from your face. It will drip onto the bike. I really like the Boko visor. That is not my official gear recommendation, just FYI, because I want to do it.
That's not the gear pick of the week?
It's not the gear pick of the week, but I'm going to recommend it. And maybe I'll circle back to it another gear pick of the week. But in general, something to keep that sweat out of your eyes because you will still sweat even if you have a fan going.
Mm-hmm. Also, a table. I have a table sort of on both sides of my bike, and I can hold my laptop and my snacks and my drinks and my fans and TV controls, all kinds of stuff, right? And I use these medical tables. So again, we'll put a link to it. They're really great. They go up and down very easily. And again, there's some very expensive cycling-specific tables out there. I mean, if you want to buy them, sure, God bless you, go for it.
Yeah, but you don't need going to your local geriatric supply store to get your medical.
So yes, the pain cave here could be actually right. Could be a medical ward or a cycling studio, right?
We also recommend, grab some AirPods or some type of noise canceling headphones because the trainer noise can be kind of annoying. But if you are regularly lubing your chain, that will help a little bit with some really squeaky noises. Either way, love those noise canceling.
I'm so glad you added lube your chain because I'll often find that my trainer's really loud today. And I realize it's just my chain and my cassette. And I'm quite obsessive about lubing my chain sort of almost every ride outside. And for some reason, for years, I just never thought about doing it inside. It wasn't until last year I started putting lube, but I was like, wait, my trainer just got a lot quieter. I was like, actually, your bike just got a lot quieter.
So definitely lube your chain and also pump up your tires every couple of weeks. They do wear down while you're riding on the trainer. So definitely think about that.
And if you do have a smart trainer, we do recommend, most smart trainers broadcast two signals. We're not going to get too technical about it, but there's a Bluetooth and an ANT. Bluetooth, as we all know, can be a little bit hinky and hard to connect to your laptop. So we always recommend getting this ANT USB stick that we have in the notes here. And that just will save you a lot of hassle, shall we say.
Yes. And we don't want to spend the whole podcast on troubleshooting, but in the show notes, we'll link a bunch of other things that we recommend in terms of just getting your trainer set up and troubleshooting it because it can sometimes be a little frustrating. And we don't want you to waste workout time on trying to figure out your trainer.
So pro tip, we mentioned Zwift group meetups, but the best part is if you can invite people over to your pain cave, and that'll really make a long or even a short ride bearable and fun, right?
What do you think is the record for the most number of people we've had in the pain cave riding at one time, Jim?
I think we had close to 10, maybe 10, 10 at one point.
10 people in like a 10 by 10 room. So.
And it made the house smell terrible upstairs.
But we still recommend it.
Yes, we do.
Makes those rides bearable.
Exactly right.
That's awesome. Maybe let's also go over, this is sort of a pro tip, but maybe some favorite foods, things to distract us on the trainer. So what are your favorite trainer snacks?
Yes, well, we mentioned a Major's Bakery multiple times, the fig bars.
We're still looking for that sponsorship.
We are, right.
If you're out there.
Yes, we're out there, right. I'm grooving now on Element and my Hydro Flask. So put Element in there and then put a bunch of ice cubes in there. So ice cold Element. I love that. And then on trainer rides, we'll just make a big plate of food and whatever, put everything on the muffins or cookies or almond butter and jelly on tortilla, banana bread, really anything, King Arthur flour cookies. Just put a big pile in front of you. It's like, just go for it. You have to eat all this.
Yep. Yeah. And we'd say that like once you get outside and you're doing your race simulations, we're going to be more intentional about like, okay, what can you actually eat on race day? But you have probably 3 months to get that ready. If you're doing a summer race, you can get that ready in April and May and June and maybe July. So treat yourself to that plate of food while you're inside on the trainer for sure.
And you can still do King Arthur cookies both inside and out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we have permission, yes.
King Arthur cookies can fit in a bike jersey and they can fit on your trainer plate. Awesome.
Okay, so Katie, what's your favorite thing to watch on the trainer?
So you're going to hate me for this, but when I'm doing zone 1, zone 2 rides, I actually do work on the trainer a little bit. That is one of my secrets. But as it turns out, the administration of the endurance drive does take some time and I can justify it more if I'm combining it with my workouts. So if you're getting an email from me as an athlete, there's a good chance that I'm doing it from the trainer. But when I'm doing harder things that I can't actually be typing or I need to be really focused, I really like podcasts. I really like music. And sometimes, I'll put on a movie, I'll put on a show, I'll pick a show and binge it for an entire season on the trainer. So that's been fun.
Doing 2 things at once. I'm really surprised. We're all really surprised, Katie. You're being super efficient on the trainer.
What work do you do on the show?
Yeah. I really work a lot on watching the Office Superfan episodes. It's really important, right? So,
Yep.
So if you're not getting an email from me, I'm watching the Superfan episodes of The Office.
I do have to say, we didn't actually discover that you could watch shows or do other fun things on the trainer.
Correction here. We would do these long workouts, yes. and I'd say, Katie, can we watch TV? And Katie would say, no, you must earn your TV. So it'd either be what we would talk or it'd be silent. I guess we listen to music, right? Yeah. And then after a certain while, I'd say, okay, you earn your TV.
That's the thing. If you have something to look forward to, it makes it so like you can't have the candy at the first second.
Yes, you can.
Well, what I was going to say was that before we even got into that, the first winter that we were in the Pain Cave, it was the December of 2018, I believe. We just listened to the Peanuts Christmas carols. And that was just the music that plays in Jim's house for like the 2 months leading up to Christmas. And we would just listen to like Peanuts Christmas for hours and hours on end.
Hey, listen, once Halloween is over, it's Peanuts Christmas all the way through.
So all this is to say, do what you need to do to make the trainer bearable. You can listen to Peanuts Christmas. You can catch up on emails. You can listen to podcasts or you can watch The Office. We support all of that. And we just want you to get your workouts in.
Whew, okay. All right. Set it for trainer. We've done a lot of trainer stuff today.
Yes.
Yeah?
And if you're like a runner and you're listening to this and you're like, I just want to do this for zone 1, you probably want to hear some of the other content we have. So move to listener questions.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. All right.
First, listener question. This was a great one. Mm-hmm. One of our listeners said, can I ignore Garmin's training status forever? Because we do so much zone 2 training, it's always telling me I have a high aerobic shortage and an unproductive status. Is there any meaningful info to be taken from this?
Oh, it's such a great question.
Yes.
We spend so much time telling our athletes, ignore Garmin. It's just, the type of stuff it spits out, it's crazy talk, right? So you get this unproductive, you got all kinds of messages. So really just the short answer is please ignore it.
And a good example of that is, Garmin sometimes isn't even integrating various devices that you use, so it may not be capturing all of your activity. And I don't think it subscribes to the exact same model of 80-20 as we do. So it seems to want to have like this equal distribution across all zones that doesn't correspond with what science says is going to be the best for your training gains. So yeah, agreed. The short answer is just turn off all those notifications. Listen to us. We will tell you if we think that you're unproductive. But if you're asking that question, the answer is probably not. You're probably being pretty productive.
Yeah, as you mentioned, so I have a Garmin 955 watch and I have a Garmin 520 cycling watch. And all that data ends up on the Garmin data servers. Mm-hmm. And yet still, if you do a big block of, say, cycling, but then on the watch, it'll tell you, oh, you're really unproductive aerobically. So I just wrote 10 hours on the I think you're really productive. So the point is they have all your data, but they're not even looking at and comparing their own data.
Yes. Yeah. So sorry to Garmin, but yeah, keep using your Garmin, but only for the things we tell you to. Later, we will do an episode on good data and bad data.
Second question, can we do too much zone 1 and zone 2, especially on the bike as we shake off the dust from the off season?
This is also a really good question. And so we have told you that zone 2 is our religion and gospel, but we will also tell you that the short answer is yes. While these zones create the foundation for what we need, we do need to remember that our bodies are really, really good at adapting to a stimulus. So if you do the same thing for weeks and weeks on end, you won't really be getting a new stimulus. So we have to think about that 20% of the 80-20 being just as important. The 20% improves the function of the mitochondria.
Right. And so, aerobic exercise is it's one piece of the fitness puzzle, right? And so we still have, muscular endurance and strength and all kinds of other things. So there's all these different systems, right? Aerobic system, the metabolic system, the muscular system, the mental system, right? Mm-hmm. And so that 20% really is super important as well.
Yeah. So, but all that is to say 80% still stands. So, yes. Keep adding on volume. Just make sure that you're correspondingly adding on the pickups that we tell you to. But we've got that covered. Don't worry about us and Zone 2.
This last question, probably a good one for you, is Zone 2 training equally beneficial for male and female athletes?
Yeah, so this was a great question that we got, and it was sort of responding to a headline that came out recently that was saying, women should not be doing as much Zone 2 training. It's not as beneficial. And so what I want to clarify here is that, yes, at baseline, females have more type 1 muscle fibers and a higher reliance on fat metabolism as compared to males. And so our ability to use fat as fuel is pretty good at baseline. So maybe, yes, Zone 2 training is not going to change this side of the equation as much as it might for male athletes, and we should be doing lots of pickups. However, gray zone training is still bad for various reasons. What we like about Zone 2 is that you can really increase your overall training volume without totally beating up your body and your mind. So we can say increase training volume by 30 to 50% over your unstructured or gray zone training, and you're going to feel a lot better both physically and mentally with that increased training volume. So you need to be thinking about that as building durability to get ready for a really long race. So in general, it might not be the exact same physiological process, but I would recommend Zone 2 and 80-20 for female athletes just as much as male athletes.
Those are great questions.
Yeah, great questions.
We have smart listeners.
We have really good listeners.
Yes, we do.
I am impressed that they trust us to answer all their questions, but they keep coming back. So.
Oh, they'll learn.
Well, please feel free to continue submitting questions. You can email us. You can fill out our listener question form. We've talked about telegrams. We're also super into that. So
we have telegrams and postcards.
Yes.
Definitely. Or what are those little banners behind the airplanes, across the sky, right? Exactly. Yeah, you can use that too as well.
All right. We are now at our longest episode ever. Apologies that it was about an indoor topic, but I hope it was interesting. And we are going to close with our favorite segment, Gear Pick of the Week. So, Jim, what is your Gear Pick of the Week?
So, sticking on the trainer and bike theme, I'm picking the ISM saddles for this. So, I put them all on my tri bike, my road bike, gravel bike, snow bike, a mountain bike, a lot of bikes. And so, but anyway, check them out, ISM saddles.
Mm-hmm. And I found that ISM saddles didn't necessarily work as well for me. So I've linked a couple of alternative saddles on my female athlete research page, which I will also link in the extended show notes. But my gear pick of the week is actually related to our first gear order for the endurance drive this year. And I'm going to recommend the Endura Athletic Sports Bra. It's the square neck sports bra. We are doing a custom order. So we have a really cool pattern and we've got the logo, and that's available until January 21st. So you have a little bit of time to get that order in. But I'm telling you, these have gotten me through multiple Ironmans before. They're a small business that was founded by a former Dartmouth cross-country skier, and she just does such good work. And I honestly think that they're the best sports bras in the world. I have, basically gotten rid of every other sports bra that I have and exclusively use these. They're tailored to individual body shapes and sizes. And yeah, can't recommend them highly enough. So definitely fill out our order form and get yourself some Endura.
Boom, we did it.
We did it.
Wow.
Long episode.
Long. Thanks. But we just appreciate folks listening and all the feedback. So much feedback from folks.
We really,
and it's
really
just great. And, we started off this podcast and maybe one person is going to listen. Mm-hmm. It seems like we have more than one person, which is great.
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much. Please continue giving us ratings and reviews if you can. And thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next week.
See you, peeps.